No, we're not going to do ASMR. Okay, so this is going to be an exercise in how we use fluids in Maya to build up a kind of realistic looking fire here. You'll notice that I have the incandescence on the logs that are sort of glowing. You will also notice that there's a bit of a glitch up here. We'll talk about how to resolve that from when you guys are rendering this. This is something that you are going to want to follow all the way through with this. There are a number of settings that we'll have to go through to actually make this look good. And since it is a fluid effect, yes, there can be things that happen that you don't expect to happen, and then all of a sudden everything looks just really, really strange. So make sure you're following along. The first thing I'm going to do is get that off, turn off my crackling fire. Maybe that's actually grades coming up, the sound of burning. Anyways, we're going to go ahead and create ourselves a log. And to do that, I'm going to create just a shape like this. And I've already downloaded some textures that we'll be working with. The main thing is that we want to unwrap that, so UV unwrap, or the UV editor. And let's utilize our space a little bit better. I'm going to go into face mode, move this over, grab these, move this down, and okay. All right, now that I have this, grab these, move these up, and stretch them out. I'm going to go to my UVs, drag across here, pull these down more, and I'm going to snap these edges to the sides of my UV space. All right, now that I have all this going on, I can scale these up as well. They're a little bit small. Okay. Now that I have something like this going on, I'm going to be able to output that. So making sure that we have our object, go to object mode, and we are going to go to image, EV snapshot. I already have these output here, so these are already set up. We'll check these out. So if I open up some of those, we'll check out how this was constructed. Okay. So the main thing that we want to focus on is generating a color, normal, and we can do a specular and a incandescence. This is what this is going to be. So not anything is labeled in here. It's all kind of messy. So hold on a second. Let me just close that up and hide that. All right. So I went to textures.com and I downloaded some bark, and I also downloaded the end cutting of, so the side view of a log, essentially. So my UVs were put together in a way that, you can see them right here. So it's following those, the cap of my cylinder along the edge rings and just that long part. So I made that and I saved that out, and then I ended up generating this thing. So we'll talk about how I make that, because this is a pretty obvious thing for now for advanced animation. However, how do we get this to turn into a normal map? Well, if we were to go to normal map online, I just Google that and click on this link, and I go, let's see, I've got my image that I saved out, So I'm going to pull that up here in a second. So I'll go into my source images, and so I've got that fire color. If I drag this in, so I've got that off screen right here, drag this in to right here, so load it up, flip your height, and download that. And that'll be your normal map. Also, you can download your specular. That'll be helpful. So I'm going to try and give it some more contrast. You don't really need a lot for your specular. It is a chunk of burning wood, so it shouldn't be super, super shiny. But it should just be enough that we can get a little bit of highlight off that for the normals. Now that we have something like this, we will go into Maya and plug all of that in. So if I go into Maya and I go into my hypershade, I am going to go to the shader for Arnold, create a standard surface. I'm going to go to color, and I'm going to link in my color. So let's wait for that to show up here. Okay, so I have my fire color, and I can also link in my specular. I'm going to click on color for that, and we will load that one in. And did I create that one for this one? If I did not, hold on one second. Let me just save that again. So I'll save this. Okay, let me put that in. And ignore my naming conventions because I'm rapidly throwing these together because I want to get to the fire part. So that's called fire or specular map. I should call that fire specular map. I'm going to load that one in as well. And now I need my normals. So in Arnold, for our materials, it would be underneath geometry. We would go to our bump mapping, click on fire, and we'll load that in. That would be should be similar to that one. So hopefully that'll all line up. If it doesn't, let me just save out that one again. Go to normals and download. All right, I'll throw that into there. So now I should have a normal map, I have a specular map, and I also have my color map. Now, when we loaded this bump map in for that node, remember that that doesn't come in as a normal, it comes in as a bump. So we want to change that to tangent space normals just by clicking on this node and then changing that to use as tangent space normals. I'll close, or I'll move this over, have that selected, right click, assign materials to selection, close that, go to shading, hardware texturing, and now I have something that's barely legible but should be usable for my model. Let me just check one thing here to see if my UVs are off. UVs, UV editor. Okay, let me just shrink these down a little bit to match. There's 1 and 2. Okay. Now that I have this, let's give it a check at Arnold. So I'm going to go into my Arnold view. You can't see it off screen, but that's okay. I'll show it in a second. I'm also going to turn on my area light, crank that value up, and let's give it a look. Okay, I think that should do. Obviously, I'm not really setting up lighting for rendering or anything yet. I'm just kind of seeing how that material was created, and if it seems like it'll be working for this, and it will. So that's good for now. I'm gonna hit delete on my light because I don't need it at the moment. I'm gonna grab this thing and I'll rotate it and duplicate it, rotate it, move it up a little bit so it's feeling like they're laying on top of each other, and a nice campfire. Okay, so now that I have this, I am going to modify it just by going and grabbing one edge of that and just making it so one's a little bit skinnier than the other one, and we can even shrink some of these. So now it looks a little bit more like it's a real organic piece of logs or wood that are being laid out here. So now that I have something like this, let's go back to Photoshop and check out how to add a little bit of a texture on it that would make it look like it's on fire. What I'm going to do is go into my colors. I made a new layer. I'm going to change this to like black and orange, and I will go to filter, render. Now flame, yeah, flame is there. It's not going to work. So filter, not for what we need. Render, and I'm going to go fibers. And I'm going to increase my variance, and I'll reduce my strength so it stays sort of like this. Hit OK. That's what I want, but right now it's super tiny, and I want these to be rather large. So I'm just scaling this up quite a bit. And now I'm going to go to filter. I'm going to go to my filter gallery. And right inside of here, what I'm looking for is something that would give me more of a chunky look to it. So dry brush would work. If I increase my brush size, reduce the detail, something like that, I'll hit OK. And from here, I'm going to duplicate that. So right click, duplicate that layer. I'm going to turn this on to, let's do multiply. And I'm just kind of moving it over. So this is kind of what I'm going to use, something like this to generate. Actually, let me just I'm going to grab this. I'm going to hit image crop. Remember we did that in our texturing class to be able to crop down on a scaled image because we scaled it up. Now I have something like this, that's a little bit better. I'm going to hit File, Save As, and I'll save that as my incandescence. So I already have that, and I'm going to go into here in Arnold now. And inside of Arnold, I'm going to click on this shader that I have, which I should probably give it a new name. We'll call that Firewood Material. You'll notice under emission, I have weight and color. I'm going to go to my bear with me for one second. So what I'm going to do is go into just checking my notes to make sure we're not going off anything here. Okay. I am going to link my color into here. Go to File, load that in. I'll wait for the machine to catch up. Come on, buddy. Okay, so what I'm trying to find is my incandescence, and it should look something similar like that, or like this. You load it up, hit open, and now that we have this loaded, if we increase the weight on that, you'll notice that it's starting to shine through. So that's pretty cool. Now that I have this, I'm actually going to shrink this down so we can sort of play around with this. I'm going to animate my scene. Let's just go 120 frames like by default, and that'll be how long our fire is going to last for. So at frame 1, let's say the incandescence that I have is right now 0.860. Okay, let's right click and hit set key. We go to maybe around frame 30. Let's change that. Drop that down a little bit. Right click. Whoop. Go back. Okay, right click. Set key. And frame 60 or whatever. We'll bring that back up. Set key. And frame 90. Bring that back down. Set key. Frame 120. Bring that up again. Right click. Set key. Alright, so now that I have this, if I hit play, you'll see it starting to kind of pulsate. So it looks like it's a little bit like a glow on a log. Okay, now's the fun part. We can actually start to build out our fire. To do that, I'm going to create ground plane, and I'm going to build some rocks around just by creating some geometry. See if copying and pasting from another file will work here while it's open. And it did, good. All right, so I got this and just some chunks of rocks. How I made those, they're all cubes. Just moved them around. So I have these, move these around some more. Good, good, good. All right. Now I want to have these like a rock texture. You guys should be able to do that by now. Save you that boring process to do this. So the next step is going to be adding a dome. And by a dome, I mean I'm going to add this thing. It's going to be a giant sphere to encapsulate everything inside. And the reason why is because when you work with fluids or anything like that, and you're going to be exporting this as an EXR, there's transparency on that. I don't want to have that happen. In the video that you saw of me playing that animation, it ended up having a part like black across the top. So this is going to prevent that from happening. I'm going to make sure that I go into my render stats, and okay, so it's double-sided for now. That's fine. So that'll render. So that's good. Now I don't want to be able to touch any of this stuff. I just want to mess with the particles when I create that. So first thing I need to do is combine all of these. So I'm going to go to Mesh, Combine. Then we go to Edit, Delete by Type, History. And we'll even do a modify freeze transformations. Okay, so now that I have that, this is good. What I can do now is I'll add the rest of this stuff to background. Now that I have that, hit save. And I'm going to save as well. Call this fire demo for myself. Okay. And now we need to start making our fire. So the first thing we need to do is create a 3D container. And so we need to change our layout to be under FX. Go to Fluids, 3D Container. You'll notice that it starts out at a certain size. It's hard to see inside of here, so I'm actually going to go into my render and make this thing not be double-sided. And I'm going to reverse it. So I'm going to go into Modeling, Mesh Display, Reverse. So now I can actually see what the heck is going on. All right, now that I have that, I'm going to move this up. Okay. Now I have a container that's going to hold my particles inside of this, or my fluid. But the problem is that I do not have an object that's going to make fluid. If I hit play, it's going to be coming right out the middle. I don't want that. So what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to have this container. I'm going to actually have this firewood selected, select the container, and now under FX, I'm going to fluids, add edit contents, and emit from object. So now if I were to hit play, you'll see two different fluids. One comes from right here, and another one comes from the fire. I'm going to hit delete on that main one, and now if I hit play, it's emanating from that main piece of firewood. Now it doesn't look pretty. It just looks like this blobby white smoke, which yes, this is how we can make smoke as well. What I need to do is adjust some of these settings and parameters to make this actually look like some fire. So first thing I'm going to do is have this selected and go to my attribute editor. I'm going to change my base resolution to something like 130. And that's going to give me a better, more detailed smoke as this comes out. You'll also notice, though, it takes a hell of a lot longer for this to play. So that's the downside of working with such high res. For now, I'm going to drop that down to 80, and hopefully I remember to come back to that. Okay, I'm going to drop this down to 5. Actually, let's leave that alone. We'll do that a little bit later. I'm going to do boundary, none, none. Both sides, we'll leave that alone. And okay, under contents method, dynamic grid, change temperature to dynamic grid. Okay. Fuel, we're going to leave that alone. We are going to leave the display alone. Let's go to dynamic simulation. All of this is going to be left alone as well. Liquids is going to be the same. The next step for this modification, though, is to turn on auto resize. And I have that on 200, and the rest of this we're going to leave alone. And the way that this is going to change is, you notice if we hit play now, it's going to be small, and it's going to build up from there. That's going to allow for this to scale based on the size of my fire. Okay. Next. The next spot that we need to be able to mess around with is underneath content details. So if we go to density, I have this set to 5. My buoyancy is set to 1, so I'm going to jack that up to 20. From here, if I were to hit play, you'll notice right away that's a lot faster in how it rises. So it's rising up more realistically like how fire is done. I'm going to also change my dissipation. So this should help for the higher it gets. I found to kind of keep it contained within this area. It may not look so great yet, but this is through trial and error. I've found that this number is actually pretty good for what I'm showing you right now. Again, if you're going to be using different fires or different setups, you're going to have different numbers that you'll have to play around with. There is no end-all solution, just plug and play. You need to experiment with these numbers, and it is all, just like I say all the time in class, falling down the stairs and learning, oh, don't put your foot there, or, oh yeah, I had to change this up before I moved around. Velocity, I'm going to change my swirl. So fire is constantly spinning around and moving, along with turbulence. And turbulence I'm going to have, let's go around 0.85, and let's keep the frequency at, actually we're going to change that to 2, and let's see what this looks like now. Okay. May not be noticeable yet. So let's actually bring out our Arnold lights. We're going to put an aerial light in. And we go to panels and look through selected so I can just aim this a little bit faster. Okay, so I got this right here. Panels, perspective. Okay. Now that we have that, let's turn on our Arnold render view real quick and see what we got. So if I hit play, okay, a bit dark. So let's increase the brightness of our scene, or the intensity of the light, and some exposure here. Don't want to go too crazy, but we want it enough we can see it. Now I'm going to hit pause or stop on my Arnold view, and I'm going to hit play on my fire preview. Now I'm going to hit stop on this. I have fire generated. Now if I hit play on this, you can see that there's fire generating here. So if you try to play more of that, it won't be able to catch up, and you're going to have Arnold fighting with it, and you'll get these weird glowing globs that are there. So it's a good idea if you want to preview the fire from now on. You turn off Arnold first, hit the play button. You can probably already hear my laptop fan going crazy right now because of this. I hit pause, or I stop the animation. It's got fire there, and to see it play on Arnold, and you can see what that made. Okay, so we're getting there. I'm going to close that. We are now at the point with our area that we can go into temperature. I'm going to turn that up to 2. And I'm going to change my buoyancy to 14.6. And let's see what else we got to do here. I have my dissipation at a 0.48 or 41, so maybe around here or so. Again, this was trying to figure out numbers for a long time. There's a lot of tutorials that are out there that show you how to do this, but this was just plug and play, trying to see if these numbers work. Nope, plug in a different number. Okay, that one didn't work. Okay, let me mess around with this until I got something I was happy with. So hopefully if you're following along, this should work out. Okay, so fuel and color, those should be the same. Nothing. Anything else we need to change right now? Yes. Underneath our shading, we are going to change the color of the selected color to a dark gray. And we're also going to play around with the incandescence of this. Right now, incandescence, selected position, that's at a 0. If we change that up, I'm going to tell us to 0.045. And I'm also, actually we don't even need to deal with that. That's just the position of each of these different values we're adding. The main thing that I want to change here is how this looks. I want it to have a little bit more character to it. So I'm going to add a couple more nodes in here for color. And how to do that is just to click anywhere and then change a color out. So I'm going to change this to like a yellow. And I'm going to move these a little bit closer in. And while I'm doing this, I should have Arnold open so I can actually modify this up. Have that play, and we can sort of see where that's going to go. Obviously, right now is not a good time because the fire hasn't generated, so we should hit play. Hit stop, and then now hit play here. We can start to see where that flame is starting to get some colors on there. So you can notice if I pull this out this way, it becomes more yellow. If I pull these in more, it starts to lose some of those other colors. All right, I'm going to add another one, and another one, and another one in the middle, and adding another yellow here. And let's add some highlights, some bright oranges. So I want some more saturated orange. Okay. And this is a process. This is the part that probably takes the most amount of time here, is trying to get a flame that you're happy with. You'll notice sometimes there's that yellow right here. That's where that banding is happening from. You just want a little bit of that. You don't want it to go super, super, super bright, because it ends up looking a little bit too fake. So I'm going to go ahead and pause Arnold and hit play again on my timeline from the beginning, and then hit stop and then sample a different spot on here. Okay, it's starting to look a little bit better. I'm going to close this up, say I'm happy with that for now, close that, and I'm going to look through and see if there's anything else I need to change. Okay. So the next thing I need to change is actually my fluid emitter. So we're already in the fluid shape. That's that box that we made all these modifications to. The next step is to go to my fluid, sorry, not the fluid emitter, the actual, yes, the fluid emitter. Okay. Sorry, juggling 18 things here. All right. Right now, if we were to look at what our density is for how this Arnold render is handling our fire, it's looking like this. Let's make that a little bit thicker. So the density voxel per second, let's do that at 3. And I'm going to change my heat voxel per second up to 5. Now again, I'm not a scientist. I did not construct this. I just found playing with these numbers to be pretty good. You're going to need to experiment with these if you want to get good at using this. This is just a really quick crash course on how to get some fire into our scene. Now that looks like garbage. And the reason why that looks like garbage is because Maya did not handle viewing that all too well. So let's see if we can let that play through a couple times and get this to catch up. Okay, that's getting a little bit better. Let's add a couple more settings on here. So 5, we got 1. Fluid drop off, I'm going to turn that down to 0. And let's see what else we can do. Let's check fluid emission turbulence. Okay, let's turn on turbulence up to 10. And I'm going to turn my turbulence speed on to 0.48 and 11100. Okay. Again, I'm going to back this whole thing up. I'm going to stop the Arnold preview. I'm going to hit play, stop, and that's what this looks like. Okay. Let's keep going. Let's check out our volume emitter. That should be just set to 0. And let's check out our object display. All right, those should be all pretty straightforward. Now, if we were to look, this looks very kind of chunky, and that's because our base resolution right now is set at 80. So if we were to actually increase that value, I'm going to actually change my size to 5 now. And you'll notice by changing my size of my bounding box, or the container property, sorry, to 5, that actually shrunk down my fire. The problem is that it also made it so the starting point for the fire went way above where the model starts. So to be able to fix that, I'm going to keep that at 5, and I'll shrink that back down. Okay. So I have this at 5, and I shrunk that down, and now if I were to hit play, pause, and then look at what that render is, this is what I'm getting. Kind of strange. So what I'm going to end up doing is, let's just test something out here. Okay. that's looking a little bit better now. So what I ended up doing is increasing my base resolution. I'm going to turn that up to like 140. Now again, the higher this number goes, the longer this is going to take to render out. So it is very important, or even process in real time. It is very important to realize that these numbers, I'm hitting play, and this looks like garbage, and it has to compute these things in order to properly show what this is going to render as. Because it's just like the end cloth, you can't just grab it and move it around. It has to sit and think for a bit. Okay. So now, I'm going to tone that down to maybe like a 90, see if that helps on this. It's looking a little bit better. Arnold view, play. Okay, now it looks like someone poured a ton of gasoline on here for that scale. It's a little intense. So we can keep playing with these values on here to make this work better for us. So the first thing I'm going to do is look at my density, and I'm looking at the 0.5, 20, I have 8 on there. That's looking all pretty good for the values that I was trying to get there. But I think that something else is a little bit amiss on my numbers. So let's see, my temperature buoyancy, 14.658, that's looking pretty good. Let's see if I can get my dissipation to fix how high up this fire is going, because right now the way it's looking, the fire was arcing up across the top of it, and it didn't really look like a real piece of fire. So I'm going to hit pause maybe around here, hit play, and that's looking better. I'm also going to check my auto resize and see what's going on here. Okay, my dynamic offset, 0, 0, 0 is when it's starting. It's at 200. That's also what I want to see. Let's increase the auto resize margin. I'm going to do that at 8 now. I'm going to hit play. Okay, now if I were to play that, okay. Right away I'm already seeing that this is completely different than my first time doing this. It's just, there's tons of little settings that you have to constantly tweak and change. So it is, again, a process, and just playing around with some variables and seeing if every single thing is aligning the way we need it to. So I'm going to, again, go to the very top of here and change my base resolution to 200. And I'm going to see if I can do a cached playback on this. So this should cache this file now. Now, cached playback gives you a much slower playback because it's caching this. But what that's going to do for me is give me a better approximation of how the fire is going to behave when we render this out. Before we did that, every time we were to press play, it looked very chunky, and it didn't really look like a desirable render. So with cached playback, it's actually processing this out for us a little bit better, and hopefully will give us the desired results once we hit Arnold render. So let's let this play through here and see where that's going to go. Let's see. maybe we can let's see. All right, I'm not going to wait that long. All right. So I'm going to hit Arnold, open Arnold render view, and hit play. And right away, you can see it's taking a lot longer to render this out too. But notice with the values that I've added, with a base resolution of 200, that the quality of this is better. It was completely misleading when we increased this number and hit play. It looked like it had exploded. So that is that cached playback for us. So notice this took quite a bit of time to render this out too. Okay. So that would be closer to what we'd actually see for our render. Be aware to be able to see that preview, because if I were to just hit play and let that try to think itself way out, it's going to be chunky again. But it did cache out that first part. If I go over to here, no, it's not going to do that. Whoop. Notice this is what I'm talking about, that super chunky effect. Because this is not the proper playback. It hasn't really thought about this area. Over here it has. So if I go over to the beginning part, looks a little bit more refined. So we need to run a cache playback by hitting right click, cache playback. And it'll do an evaluation of that particle for us. So it'll take some time. I'm hoping that on the machines at school, these will be a little bit faster for us. So once we're done with all this, we'll want to set up our Arnold render, just like how we'd render anything out and render this. So this is only going to be 4 seconds long. I'm not going to have you go any further than that. Following these numbers, again, reading down the list here, it's a base resolution of 200. I gave a size of 5 for my Y. Boundary X is none, boundary Y is none, boundary Z is both sides. I have dynamic grid set for everything. I have my auto resizes on, max resolution set to 200, and my auto resize margin is set to 8. Auto resize threshold, I think by default, is at 10. My density under content details, 0.5, 20 for buoyancy, 8 for dissipation, and then velocity, I have 2.945, and strength is 8.50, frequency is 2, so temperature is 2, buoyancy is 14.6, dissipation is 0.726, and in my shading I have changed my selected color to a dark gray. I've given some color on that. And then for my fluid emitter, I made sure that I had my density voxel up to 3, and I've added my heat voxel up to 5. This and fluid emission turbulence gradient 10.48. This is what we should be able to use to get our fire. Now remember, I have this inside of a sphere, so I can actually get that to render. Give it some ground, so some dirt, and texture the rocks and render that out. And that is how we will make our fire. It is more of just experimenting with numbers, trial and error, and we should get something that we like.